The Butterfly's Dream by Kerberos 314, Chapter 29, OP-Ed, Part 2. Ah! For the second time, Ruby found herself falling off her bunk bed, crashing to the floor in the breathless heap. Her arms quaked as she tried to push herself to her feet, gasps forced out of her each time she slipped back down. Uh, what's going on, Ruby? Sur- Serendipitously would have Weiss be the first to wake, even though the girl had likely became all but immune to the noisy girl bunked above her. The startle of seeing her leader flopping around on their floor like a fish, eyes wide and glistening, was enough for her to throw off all decorum as well as her heavy comforter and leap to the ground in her aid. Gah, could you guys keep it? The young woman who would barely be able to drag herself out of bed at noon on weekends was awake almost instantaneously, crouching on the balls of her feet next to her hyperventilating sister, frantically trying to scoot the girl into her lap, Yang pushing past the clawing hands, desperately trying to come up for air. What's going on? Alert as if she'd always been awake, Blake was halfway out of her bed and joining the group on the floor before they realized it. Amber eyes flitting back and forth between their hyper-consciousness leader and the baffled faces surrounding her. I don't know. Ruby just fell out of bed and I noticed that she was acting really weird. Is she having a seizure or something? Has she ever had something like this before? Managing to keep her wits about her despite the situation, Blake asked the pertinent question. I don't. The illusion of knowing her sister shattered and made her stumble on things she had held on to for so long. Naru, Ruby. They all turned their attention back to the girl who was now coming around, each blink bringing back some clarity in her eyes. Something happened with Naruto. Weiss shot a look at Blake for asking what she deemed to be an inappropriate question, given the very real crisis they were having. Someone should go get the nurse. Standing up, Weiss was startled for the second time as a clammy hand grasped her wrist in an iron grip. No, don't go. Breathing more constantly, though no less raggedly and fast, Ruby managed to get out a few more words. I need you to knock me out. There was an incredulously pause in which eyes sought out some fragment of directions in the darkened room. That's it. I'm getting the nurse. You don't think you can do it, do you? That's enough, Ruby. Just calm down. And unwisely, her sister tried to get in between the two. Ha! With the only light being from the moon streaming in through the window, it took them a while to realize what had happened. Not until the prize was held up to the silver light, the golden hair throwing a sparkling contrast to the four sets of glowing eyes. Oh, shit! Ruby! In her panic state, Ruby could only smile depravedly, glassy eyes clamping shut, along with her mouth, to anticipate the blow that needed to come. Nothing happened. Yang, she eked out, slowly crackling an eye to see if she were even still in the room. The elder girl was, though, had her back turned and was trembling with barely controlled rage. No, I'm not going to hit you, Ruby. I owe you at least that much for my failures. Distraught rather than pleased with the conclusion, Ruby turned with her desperation first to Blake, who already had her hands thrown into the air to shrug off the duty. Weiss was still looking aghast at her, and so she shot to her feet and got her nose up into the other girl's face. Come on, Weiss, hit me. Haven't you wanted to do this the whole time? Well, yes. I mean, no. This is utter nonsense. Just calm down and try to explain what's going on. Maybe we can help you, though there was very little doubt of that happening. There's no time. Shaking the other girl both figuratively and literally as Ruby's twiggy arms locked onto Weiss like a vice. I bet you can't. You're just a weak, freckled, bratty disingenuous. Ruby was throwing the book at her to elicit a reaction, words she neither understood nor knew how to pronounce. All fair play. Crummy, rude, pompous, flat-chested, just as Ruby's list of just as Ruby's list of invectivities was thrown out without thought, so too was Weiss's open-handed palm, which connected to Ruby's chin. A sharp crack echoed throughout the small room and seemed to hang there along with the girl's body in rigor mortis for a full 3 breaths. Then the girl flopped over like a board on the lighty carpet floor, out cold once again. Impossibly, he had been waiting for the moment when his eyes would snap open. There was never any doubt, no delay, as the mantra of seals and chakra states memorized over the past weeks coursed through his body like a switch had been flipped. Hmm. Payne had turned his head when he felt the jerky movements from the body being dragged by the animal path. Even before that extent of himself realized something was amiss, Naruto had already gone, leaving a blinding afterglow in his place. Where did he? Making no attempt to hide, the young man crouched over one of the many unmoving bodies laying haphazardly among the remains of what was once the village hidden in the leaves, slowly drawing the limp form into his arms and burying his shadowed face into its frazzled hair, which had become untied from its tight knots. "Why did you not run?" the leader of Akatsuki asked from across the great divide, headed of the emotionless percolation like deadly radiation from the recalcitrant Jinchuriki. "If you do not even try to escape, then what did she die for?" Without a word, he took the tri-pronged kunai he had impressed upon Tenten so long ago back into his pouch, it no longer being useful, like her body, which he lay back on the stone-cold earth. Then he raised himself because he could. "Is this the first person you've ever lost?" No, it was the first he could hold with his own two hands, the first he could not escape guilt for. "And I know it won't be the last." Everything and everyone had their time in the sun. He and Ruby would have equal days and nights of their own until one outlived the other, unless by some miracle they died on the self-same day. Even if they didn't, it went without saying that one would live for the other. Who else would carry their story onward? "You accept the pain then?" I already said I did. Or are you getting forgetful?" There was no playfulness as he thumbed the haft of radiant thorn. "Just because I accept that life comes with pain doesn't mean I have to lay back and let it fuck me." He settled into wide-hipped stance, a hand halfway up the handle of his scythe, cocked behind his back, and the other brandishing a tri-pronged kunai guarding his leg. Cold chips of sapphire scanning the six enemies, Kisame still unmoved, and watching with an increased grin at the supreme comeback. "We don't get to pick where we're born, who we're born as, nor the people that call themselves friends and family. We pick and choose our struggles, and even if that's the only real choice in life, I'd say that's enough. Why choose to fight against the inevitable? Because." The kunai flew from his grip, flying straight at an impassive diva path who made no move to dodge it, still waiting for the answer to his question. That triple-bladed weapon suddenly multiplied into a tornado of steel raining aimlessly across the battlefield. There was no reason to pull punches anymore. Odd summons spawned to block the attack, including the King of Hell, which swallowed up none too few of the kunai, and Armadillo crossed with a bull grunting as the rest were deflected off its armored hide. "It seems I am the one who is failing to adapt, forgetting your obstinance," Diva Pains droned. "Next time I will cut off your arms and legs, and we shall see how well you recover from that." Without having to make an audible command, the paths most suited to fighting all leapt over the newly erected barrier. Bar Diva, who didn't bother to lift a finger, all the iconic Horatio tagged kunai were on the other side, and there was no reason for him to exert himself further. Seemingly contradicted in this thought by a flash of strawberry-colored light, he whipped around to see absolutely nothing. A ploy? But how did he even get a technique behind the bear anyway? "You know, that's not a very nice thing to say." Against all odds, the chipper voice came from behind him yet again, and though he was within striking range of the curious blonde shinobi, he was incapable of doing anything but watch as the scythe-wielder menaced his blade over the neck of an already legless Naraka path. "Let's see how you like it when you're in the same boat." It looked like a single flash of movement, but the seconds which came after saw the body of Narakapath be separated into four more pieces. "Why do you continue to fight against God? What is there?" Unperturbed by the sight of his comrade being gullied, Divapath was instead fixated on that still unanswered question. It seemed that being a god without being omniscient was more irksome, so to this thought Naruto smiled even more viciously. "Because why?" Almost as fast as the boy had been able to move, Diva had whipped his arm up and shot charcoal lances on the other sides of that unflattered Cheshire smile, impaling either shoulder and pinning him against the wall. "You will tell me if your insanity has affected others you have had contact with. I will not be able to save them without knowing what ails you." Pain slowly approached. Caution and not carelessness this time. He was not scared, no. He was a god, and this was not even a real body. But if he should be up against a genuine immortal? "There is no use in hiding behind those flesh and blood clones. I can see your chakra." Good to know. Once again, forcing the man to turn, he was treated to the sight of another Naruto, this one exuding the controlled burn, which was yokai, his entire body engulfed in flames which already bore two tails, yet not being consumed by it. The same could not be said for the severed head he clutched by the root of its once long orange hair, now returning to the brown with its defeat, and rotting more than burning from the base up in that conflict conflagration. Why? Don't you mean how? He asked with a grin, knowing that Payne's vision had been cut off from his paths for a span of all of 2 seconds. The explanation the expressionless man seethed, cloak hiding whatever trace emotions were there to be observed. Where once words had failed, all one had to do was interpret the shit-eating grin on the Jinchuriki's face, and the now third flickered tail erupting behind him to obtain the answer. He was never fighting alone. Why? Because the body accelerating faster and the red chakra could keep up, and Diva Pain was actually forced to dodge as the guillotine strike came from behind. With the next, he raised two of his unbreakable rods, used as excremum to block with a defense like iron. I will make you tell me, because every other story had been told. The only interesting ones left were those of impossibility, giving hope to the others who thought they knew how it should end. Life brought he and Ruby together, and it would be death which would tear them apart. Being separated from Ruby during that period of mediocrely induced unconsciousness made one thing clear: how to prevent it from happening again, and to be able to use that knowledge somewhere down the road, like if you encountered another person with this visible telekinetic ability and you wanted to interrupt it. In this way, it was Naruto himself who was the impossibility, converting tragedy into celebration, defeat into success. This is one of the many reasons this is their story and not mine. What is there left to fight for? Everyone you knew is dead. The scorpion tail of a Shurapath gauged a long trench out of the once hard-packed streets, forcing Naruto into the air where he was assaulted by another drill-beaked bird. Remembering what Ruby had done to the Nevermore not too long ago, he took a page from her book and decapitated it upon a listless tower. Diving in through a window, he took shelter as the Shurapath blasted a chunk from the rooftop. You're wrong, Naruto screamed from the bombed-out building, knowing that the Diva Path was waiting on bated breath. You can try and take away everything important. You can try to break me as much as possible, but you can never take away what I stand for. Whoa! Then again, maybe giving away his position wasn't such a good idea, as a hornet's nest of missiles targeted his voice and forced him to rapidly flicker between floors, the building panicking level by level behind him. Diva Pain would watch with only mild interest, because he knew that Naruto would somehow find his way out. If he didn't, the answer he would have gotten wouldn't be worth it. Then I will keep you around long enough to strip everything that you ever were aware away from you. I will take away your sight, your taste, your hearing, any and all senses you might possess, until there is nothing left of you. The diva did not have to blast away the groping hands of rusty chakra which lunged out of the rubble with a bancho tenin, the tendrils bowing around the almighty push as if they were little more than smoke. And when I am done with that, I will take away your Biju, leaving you entirely alone in the moment before you die. You're one sick motherfucker, aren't you? This pronouncement was sported with a grin, glad to be vindicated when he tore the man apart. I do this only because you refuse to see the truth. It would be that much easier if you were to simply give up. You wouldn't know the truth if it came up and bit you on the ass. At that, Diva Pain turned around to see another Naruto charging at him with a bleeding Rasengan. He didn't move a muscle as a blast of yellow energy flew over his shoulder and dispelled the clone in a cloud of smoke, one which was far larger than the norm and absorbed Diva Path. You really are starting to bore me. Surely you know that this has no chance of working. Maybe I really am just nuts. The voice came from another 100 clones, which could be seen by the other pants outside the smoke. Though that would mean your technique isn't quite as strong as you thought it was, huh? Guess you're not as divine as you pretend to be. The clones mocking him were promptly dispelled through various rods, flying like arrows and pinpoint fire from Azura Path. Though this left the field no less clear, and Naruto had already scored the most devastating blow of the match without even making contact. This was just the opening move, as more of those digit-faced snakes brought through the ground, dragging Animal Path down with them. This has gone on long enough. At the sacrifice of yet another path, he now had at least a general idea of where Naruto was. There were still Diva, Ashura, and Preta. He alone was more than sufficient to take out that stubborn worm, though the Chibaku Tensei had never fully impacted. A new crater almost as large in diameter as that earthen ball was tamped upon the ground beneath his feet as he lifted himself into the air. The cloud of obscuring smoke was brushed aside like dust, and the dirty counter leaving even more perfect desolation on that quasi-moonscape. I must commend you for being able to take out half my bodies. However, a smaller crater dimpled into the first, as an equally but impossible but opposite force rocketed out of it, heading straight for the floating diva. He brushed aside the boy's clawed hands again and again, maneuvering around it in that limitless battleground while continuing to look as unflappable as ever. Yet you have not even gained a scratch on me. Naruto was baring his teeth as he slashed, hoped, and skipped to and fro off his clones, spawning in the nick of time to keep him aloof. Apart from that animalistic demeanor, he was clearly in control of his actions. Pain had never been informed that Naruto was a perfect Jinchuriki. It was a distinct disadvantage not being able to fly, though, one which was exploited when another salvo of micro-missiles flew at him in a coordinated shell of explosions, dispelling his next platform and letting him drop. He did not fall far, only because Pain caught him by the throat and hurled him at the ground with even more velocity than before. And this is where your story ends. Picking himself off the ground, the cloaked Naruto only got about halfway before his knees buckled, body spasming as the energy felt like it was being drained out of him. It was, and as he flopped over on the ground, he saw two hands craned over him, which were drawing the angry yokai into steaming palms. Do not do not worry, you will not die just yet. There will be plenty of time while we gather the rest of the Biju. You will be the last of your brethren to be inducted, and during that period alive, you will experience the pain that I promised. Be careful. You don't take too much. It'd be pretty funny if you killed me when you already won. Don't worry. I already know this is one of your flesh clones. I am simply informing the real you, which is lurking around, waiting for its chance to strike. So sure about that. The real you would have the obnoxious weapon you stole from Hidan, Pain declared with finality. Besides, I saw when you swapped bodies in the crater. Do you truly think you can hide anything from me? You did, I did once already. Under the ministrations of Breda Path, Naruto was fading in and out of consciousness. If he were to be believed, this was the real one, and any more than a few seconds after his eyes closed would be enough to suck out chakra faster than the could be reprimanded, could be replenished, even through the hardening chakra pathways of a Jinchuriki. You're pretty gullible for a god. Foolish lies. There had never been a second time. There was no way he would be unaware of another breach of his mental link, even if it were just for the time it took to perform a replacement technique. Right? This is what you are reduced to. As an Uzumaki, you should have more pride. And Uzumaki? In a split second, where thoughts diverged, Path looked at Path, wondering if he should continue. The softness which might have then exited become a foregone memory. How truly sad. It seems you have lost more than you know, Naruto. Then, I hope you lose it all with me. Pain's hand twitched, almost cutting off the draining chakra. How much did the Nine Tails contain anyway? Legends and hearsay could only provide so much information. You are just a clone, a slightly smarter and sturdier doll. No one will mourn your loss. Still scanning, hoping that he was not mistaken. If you say so. It was so hard to keep his eyes open. I could only try, right? The smile blossomed just before the explosion, separating Diva from Bretta and blinding them both. Taking a chance, the Diva Path used his power to shove Bretta Path out of the way with the chakra absorbing ability. Bretta Path was one piece he did not want to lose. Huh, made you look. That bark of laughter was the second thing he did not want to hear, the first being the sound of flesh sliding over a wetted blade. The smoke had already cleared from his bancho tendon, and he watched as Path slid down to the base of Naruto's outstretched blade. You should have trusted your instincts. I am above such things. Let me show you. chains shining as bright as the sun, which had sunken low in the sky, erupted from the remaining Pain's back, startling Naruto with their newfound appearance, but not stopping him from using the Horizon to flash to one of his kunai scattered at the edge of the crater. No matter how fast you are, I will find you, I will catch you, Pain swore, unleashing the fire jutsu without the use of hand seals, while Naruto flashed to another one of his kunai, chakra cloak slowly rebuilding after he deactivated to hide from the devil path. Despite not understanding his logic, Pain seemed to know everything else about him, including where he would next appear. He met him there with two more solid black chakra receivers impaling themselves above his head as he crouched. All your tags are scattered around in a circle, which is child's play to predict. There is no escape. We'll see from one to the next, keeping just barely ahead of Pain's combined jutsu and throwing attacks until he started throwing the kunai in between jumps, pausing for just a second to give himself two possible paths to jump to. Pain was forced to guess which one he would use to teleport and predict this from his all-observant position in the air. The first were a 50-50 shot for Pain, a narrow miss for Naruto as he had to physically dodge and get himself signed as he lingered too long in one place. From there, the odds took off as soon hundreds of Horaishin kunai dotted the sky, being plucked seemingly at random by a pinkish lightning bolt. A carnival game with one ball and infinite cups. It wasn't a magic trick, but a complex series of exponentials that one could drive by paying attention from the beginning with a keen eye. Pain had the keen eye of all. Gotcha! Though it didn't appear that he was able to keep up with the consecutive jumps made in the blink of an eye, as Naruto suddenly appeared behind him, scythe itching to reap his soul in response for all the ones that he'd already taken. It was over unsatisfactorily quick, but it was better to be safe than the cloak-wearing man disappeared in a puff of smoke. What? Only elation he felt at the point he crossed the sound barrier was brutally shot down along with his body as his wings were clipped. He'd come too close, flown too near the sun, and now God was punishing his transgressions, sending him crashing against the ground and pinning him there for all eternity with four rods impaling through his wrists and ankles. There was no chance to cry out, as he was still trying to wrap his head around the sudden reversal and his fall from grace, trying to breathe through the blood welling up in his mouth from the tip of his tongue he'd bitten off. All he could think of was how Ruby would probably laugh at him, how pathetic he looked. He hoped she would, as long as it would keep her from crying. I truly hope that you at last see the futility, landing in front of Naruto's strained vision with hardly a speck of dust disturbed. Pain crouched over his victim as he could just barely see those condescending, ringed eyes staring down at him. The one who made it last this long is you. All this pain is derived from people like you who cannot understand the bigger picture, refuse to see the suffering that you cause with your actions. Would you shut up already? Whatever discernment his moment defeat held, he smiled in the face of it, perhaps knowing that his teeth were dyed crimson. Man, you talk more than arrow sending. I take it you mean Jiraiya Sensei. If he was expecting the information that he Pain was also once a disciple of the Sanin to be a shock, then he would be disappointed with the bordering of Naruto's smile. Possibly he was amused with the stubborn persistence, a freshness which reminded him of the old days. Huh, nope, no way. Pinned to the ground though he was, Naruto still managed to shake his head. If you're going to tell me that it was fate that had us meet because we're both Erosenin students, I'ma call bullshit. You are a strange one, Naruto. Thanks, but you're too boring for all that compliment to mean much. Ignoring the biting pain, he tried to wiggle himself free, only to give up with a cry, combining agony and frustration as the rod sucked the will to fight out of him. All you bad guys are the same. When one of you fails, you just think it's 'cause you haven't done enough crazy shit yet. What makes you think you're any different than anyone else? Why is your great plan going to succeed where others have failed? If you've got nothing new to add, just shut up! Angry tears were streaming down his face, impatiently falling on the ground, which would forever remain fallow. He buried his face in the dirt, smashing his forehead against loose rock and bits of debris, trying to keep himself away from the pain of knowledge for as long as he could. This was the end. He knew it, and he was still fighting against it, even when Pain lived up to his promise, and he would. It would be a blessing if he didn't have to think of his failure. Everything around him was gone. Almost everyone he knew in this world was dead. When he was younger, this had been the reality he was prepared himself for, not literally, of course, but the same sort of loneliness which came with such genocide. Hateful glares from the dead were no different than the living. It turned out maybe he would get lucky and really would go insane before the true misery hit. For all that it was worth, I promised to see things through until the end. Pain could take away all that, but there were still the memories, the days with Ruby that he couldn't touch. There was no point in pretending that he was going to get over this tragedy, no point in hoping for a better world beyond this one chance he'd been given. What did he ever do to deserve being so lucky? Just do it. Try to face your demise with dignity. Dignity, yeah, right. There was none of that in death. The hand passed over his head swiftly with a harsh displacement of air, almost like a blade. He prepared to black out and then wake up as someone else, feeling just as miserable, twice as hopeless. Who are you? Blinking, and he was not in that dorm room in Beacon, waiting patiently for the dawn. The sun was still setting, casting a long red shadow over him, which looked surprisingly like Ruby Rose, the bud of radiant thorn being planted in the ground for emphasis. Ruby Rosu, though it hurt, Naruto couldn't help the chuckles at Pain's confusion, trying to parse out the name while looking detachedly at his hand, which sported a new gash. What you doing down there, Naruto? He craned his neck to see her sorry smile, staring pitiably down at him. Enjoying the view, I suppose. He was looking at her face, which lolled to the side at his incorrigibleness. He not that she was any better. Not going to tell me to run off and save myself, I suppose. I'd be a hypocrite, wouldn't it? It'd be a bit hypocritical, wouldn't it? Mm-hmm. Yep, it would. Pain was agreeable to let them have their moment while he tried to parse out exactly who this girl was and how she exhibited such speed. Your turn to play the hero then. Don't get too cozy. Flicking back to face Pain, the pale face which she'd arrived with bled with color, or not quite color, but luster. I'm not sure how long I can keep him busy. It strikes me as odd that you would do so at all, despite whatever speed ability that was. You seem weak. You've caught me on a bad day, she admitted with a bit of irony before quenching that gaze with a hiss and striking a battle stance with that scythe heft like a twig. But as long as I can hold out until Erosin and Tsunade-sama get back, it would be worth the sacrifice. I hope you still feel that way in the end. Bravado as flat as ever, there might have been a hint of wavering behind that threat. It showed in the way he suddenly blitzed Bara Ruby, taking both her and the pin Naruto by surprise as she suddenly had to deflect two of the chakra rods and then contend with a torrent of water threatening to sweep her off her feet. A flicker of second thought was all she would allow herself when defending Naruto. When that was over, she stepped back so that she was straddling the young man and twirled with Radiant Thorn in front of her, drawing upon that foreign energy she'd only felt coursing through her other's body, though through some miracle the cycling scythe was covered in a thin layer of chakra, enough to offset the raging stream. Before the current even shot off, however, Bar Ruby became aware of a sixth sense, like a person crying in the back of her head, telling her to turn around. Allowing the water to slap her back was all right, being now able to block the spear headed for her spine. Skipping back to distance herself. At the same time, she dragged Radiant Thorn behind her and severing two of the four rods, keeping Naruto in place. Pain lunged to nullify her actions, but was stimmed yet again by the remarkable speed and prowess displayed by this frail-looking girl. Her style was impossibly polished, and the way she gripped the oversized scythe was familiar, almost as if you used the same style as Naruto. You might say I taught it to him. She was all too content to talk rather than fight, letting Naruto wriggle his way out of the stubby restraints and hopefully free himself. Who are you, really, I wonder? Uncomfortable under that deceptive gaze, she managed not to tremble and hold her ground in front of Naruto for a few precious seconds longer. No matter, the voice came from behind, too fast, yet she still hiked up the butt of her weapon, hoping to destabilize Pain and maybe land a few hand strikes if she could. It would simply be one more life on his burdensome consciousness. Ruby! It was, as always, too little, too late. End of chapter 29.